Among the monster movie craze of the 50s, there was a subsect of films specifically focused on giant insects, a fad formerly kicked off by the critical and financial success of Warner Brothers' Them, a film about ants enlarged by radiation. Seeking the same success, rival studio Universal sought out to make their own giant bug movie, one specifically to capitalize on the almost universal fear of spiders. The studio brought in many of their most talented craftsmen to make the film, most notably Jack Arnold, a director who had proven himself already with films such as It Came from Outer Space and Creature from the Black Lagoon. All of this culminated with the release of Tarantula in 1955, a film often considered one of the better giant insect entries to come from this era.
You think that was lightning we saw over to the west? If it was, it's the first time I ever seen lightning throw off sparks.
When a man with strange deformities is found dead in the Arizona desert, Dr. Matt Hastings is brought in by the local sheriff to examine the body, only to have his inquiries stifled by the deceased man's colleague, Professor Gerald Deemer, who insists that the man died of acromegaly. In actuality, the doctor has been secretly working on a super nutrient in an attempt to solve world hunger, an unintended side effect of which is the sudden rapid growth in size of the test subjects. When Deemer is suddenly attacked by his lab assistant, the lab catches fire, setting free one of the test animals, a tarantula, already the size of a dog and growing fast. Soon people and cattle alike begin disappearing, their remains stripped to the bone, prompting Dr. Hastings and local law enforcement to investigate just what could be causing these strange and disturbing events.
Jumping Jupiter!
Tarantula has one of the most intriguing opening scenes in a giant monster movie, showing a clearly deformed man wandering the desert in his pajamas. It's not the sort of image you expect to see, and sets the stage for what would end up being a different sort of creature feature than was more common at the time. For one, the film bucks the trend of having the monster be born of atomic testing, though it is still the result of human scientific hubris. The film also plays lightly with body horror elements, which, along with the eerily empty desert location, slow burn plot, and the fact that the titular monster is a giant spider, gives the film more of an explicit horror vibe than you might expect. As was commonly the case with its competitors, the human cast of Tarantula plays second fiddle to the monster, which, aside from the occasional close-up shot, is mostly brought to life on screen by a real tarantula, as opposed to puppetry or stop-motion animation, and the result is surprisingly good. The optical effects used to enlarge and superimpose it over real footage works really well, especially in black and white, hiding any effects deficiencies that might have been more obvious in color. This was revolutionary effects work back in the day, and are very convincing for the time. An unfortunate side effect, however, is that the tarantula is never shown moving at anything beyond a slow pace, which does make it feel less threatening given how fast spiders actually are. This is a roundabout way of saying that maybe the film could have used some of Ray Harryhausen's stop motion. The characters in Tarantula are fairly standard genre archetypes, likable and interesting enough, but not especially noteworthy either. John Agar brings charm and charisma to the screen as Dr. Matt Hastings, as does Mara Corday as Stephanie Clayton, a biology graduate who arrives to assist the professor with his experiments. As expected, there is a romance between the two, but both actors have good enough on-screen chemistry that it feels fairly organic and never detracts or slows down the story. The most memorable performance comes from that of Leo Carroll as Professor Gerald Deemer, a scientist willing to go to terrible lengths to complete his work. His performance is the most theatrical, but he never steps over the line into outright caricature, and the result is a character that is both sinister and sympathetic.
Yes. Well, I did. I asked him to see a doctor, but he won't do it.
Tarantula's biggest flaw is its pacing. The film takes a very long time to get going, which for the most part is good and works well to build up a sense of inevitable dread. The problem, however, is that it builds up to a rushed conclusion that doesn't satisfy on either an emotional or visceral level. Just as the film feels like it's entering an action-packed final act, it ends very abruptly, dispensing with all the tension that had been built up to that point. It just feels like the film could have gone on for another 10 minutes, like it's missing that extra effort in its final act that would have pushed it into becoming something truly exceptional.
Sergeant, tell them to load up with napalm, rockets, anything they've got.
In the end, Tarantula is a decidedly middle-of-the-road monster movie. Good in many ways, but hampered by a third act that seriously misses the mark. It's well-paced and mysterious, the characters are decent, and the slight emphasis on body horror adds a unique horrific layer to the giant monster story structure. It's just too bad it all amounts to a dud of a conclusion. Still, it's worth checking out at least once. Just keep your expectations low, and you might come out pleasantly surprised. For more reviews and opinions on all things kaiju, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths.